Ted Dabrowski, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Hey, thank you guys. Good morning.
So what you've looked at, I mean, is there any question in your mind based on the evidence that we have to this point about the impact on learning from school shutdowns?
Well, let me give you one stat that I found interesting that was in the Wall Street Journal, part of a publication. It's been a few months ago, but in Florida, they kept their schools open, or let me say it this way, 96% of the state's kids remained in classroom during the pandemic, 96%. So they were open. In Illinois, it was 37% of children on average were in school during the pandemic. That's a massive, massive difference, and we know how failed remote learning was. So to me, there's no question, and we're going to be releasing some of the data. You guys have already released some, but we're going to show across the state the performance between 2021 and 2019, and it's pretty phenomenal. But it's amazing, actually, the drops in learning, not just in the really nice areas, in all areas. You can see it in math scores, reading scores. It's pretty phenomenal.
Well, what kind of declines were we seeing? And it was mostly in math or more in reading or both?
Oh, both. And we're talking about even what was interesting is, and I'll have to look at the data, we'll release it, but some school districts that were up in the 60%, so this is the better schools, 60% in reading proficiency, they dropped down to like 30 and 40. You're talking about 30 and 40 percentage point drops. It was massive. And then, of course, you've got places like Chicago and others that were already so low, and they became even lower. So it's pitiful across the board.
I wanted to get your distillation on another topic that we're getting a lot of emails about. People want to understand it. This Amendment 1 ballot initiative on the November ballot in Illinois that would codify collective bargaining rights for unions in Illinois. And, of course, the question becomes, well, what's the big problem? I mean, Republicans say, like me, I'm all for collective bargaining rights. If people want to try and organize and establish a bargaining unit, then they have the right to do that. So what's the problem with just codifying it in the Constitution?
Yeah, this is probably the biggest deal there is, this biggest vote on the November ballot, bigger than governor, bigger than Supreme Court. I argue, the more I look at this, I argue that this is even worse than the Pension Protection Clause. And there's going to be a lot of noise, a lot of the fake advertising that we see about what it does. But the reality is this. It will create the strongest, massive powers for the Illinois public sector unions, and it'll forget the laws. It'll put all that power right into the Constitution so that it will be almost impossible to ever bring down property taxes again, which if some people want that, that's good, right? If they want more government union powers, that's good for them if they want it. But
yeah, I hear a lot of people saying the property taxes are too low in Illinois. So maybe
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Ralph Martieri and other guys say they want higher taxes overall. They want to pay for more stuff. They want more safety for workers, all this kind of stuff. And, what Amendment 1 does is it says, forget our laws. We're going to put all these collective bargaining powers and new rights for workers. Here's what happens. These rights for workers protect their safety. This is a new word. And also economic welfare. So imagine this scenario, and this is the scary one. With this in the Constitution, imagine a school district, and it's not hard to imagine. Imagine the unions at a school district putting into the contract, we want the sex ed stuff starting in kindergarten. We want all the CRT stuff ASAP. And they put that in the contract. And because the public doesn't get to find out what's in the contract until after it's signed in Illinois, well, that would be part of the collective bargaining agreement. And because it's now protected by the Illinois Constitution, imagine trying to unwind that. If there's any chance of it, it'll be litigated forever in the courts, and the unions will keep pointing at the Constitution, just like they do for pensions, to say, hey, sorry, this is part of our agreement. You can't. You're damaging our safety if you take out that stuff. So it creates a new hell for Illinois, and I think it's going to be far worse than the Pension Protection Clause.
So just to be clear, so the collective bargaining agreements, including those where in the public sector, where they're on both sides of the negotiating table, right? They're financing the politicians they're negotiating with, which is why people like, the FDR and the founder of the AFL-CIO oppose public sector unions. But I digress. They strike a deal, and that will have constitutional protection. So if you passed a state statute to try to change the structure of pensions or taxpayer-provided health insurance or whatever, they would have override because our agreement is protected by constitutional sanction.
That's right. So, the amendment actually says two things. One, it enshrines all those powers, gives all those powers to the public sector unions. But number two, it says no laws shall be passed that diminish, interfere with. So in other words, once we get that in the Constitution, legislature don't even think about passing any laws that mess with our powers. Wow. And what's fascinating about this, Dan and Amy, is that some Republicans voted for this.
Of course they did.
And they
well,
put
which
it on the
Republicans voted for this?
Of course they did.
What are they arguing that? Why are they arguing that this is needed?
They're arguing, I'm afraid of the public sector unions.
Or they're saying, I need their vote?
Yeah, and they're saying, also, there's a whole confusion about whether this covers the private sector. But the private sector, all the safety and stuff, you'll see these commercials about protecting nurses, private sector nurses and all that. It's not true. The federal law covers the private sector, and it preempts anything the state would do. So when you see these commercials, they're just untrue. This amendment will have nothing to do with that.
Yeah, I mean, why do we have
a little kid?
Why do we have a National Labor Relations Board then?
Exactly. So with that, then it's all about powers for the public sector union.
Just to be clear, so what they're going to do, public sector unions will lock in their unsustainable salary increases and associated pension and health care benefits, and there is no chance ever that they will go anything other than up, subject to bankruptcy and some sort of federal receivership that Illinois goes into. But I mean, just in terms of what happens at the state level, you can just forget it, that this codifies that we're all here as spare parts to be used by the public sector unions as they see fit.
Yeah, that's correct, Dan. That's number one. And number two, it's even worse than that because they codify these new rights for workers, and these rights are going to be equivalent to freedom of speech and freedom of religion, and those rights protect workers' economic welfare and safety. So now that means, and this is undefined in the Constitution, so that means they can stick in all kinds of things in the contracts that protect their safety, their economic welfare. So think affordable housing, maybe defund the police, maybe increased rights around the whole transgender movement. That can all be put into a contract because those are the new rights they have. And then because they're codified because they're in the Constitution, and the amendment says no law shall be passed that diminish those rights. Well, then what the heck's going to happen? What are people left with? And by the way, it disarms the legislature because now the legislature can do nothing. So we have removed policy, whether it's property tax policy or parents' rights policies. We've removed it from the legislature, cemented it in the Constitution, and thrown away the keys.
And you could have laws like they're moving in California to provide a tax credit for union dues. So
why not?
Yeah, why not? Why should they have to pay union dues? Let's all pay it. Socialize the cost of union dues.
Yeah, that's the big move there, is that a tax deduction for the unions paying their dues, and so it makes it cheaper. The public pays for it. It just means that the public sector unions here can go crazy. Now, again, a lot of people might like that. A lot of people don't like parents meddling in the sex ed stuff in school. So, there's people who support that. But, the opposite side of that is a whole bunch of parents who say, man, get that stuff out of my classroom. This amendment is not for them. So it's going to be a heated battle. But I think here's the important point, Dan and Amy. I don't hear any legislators talking about this. We're seeing ads being put up by the yes side, but no response about what it is, why it's good, why it's bad on why it's bad on the other side. Nobody. There's no leadership. Nothing there.
Well, can somebody get on that?
Spells the problem with Illinois.
Because those ads that I've been seeing with the nurse saying, I'm protecting this 3-0, but not because of that, I might lose my job. They're pretty effective, but people don't understand that that's not true, that ad.
True, right. Yeah, they're very effective ads. I mean, I think they're well done, but that's a scary part, and there's no opposition to it. There's no organized opposition. There's no leadership. And I think kind of spells back to your point, Dan, when isn't coming soon enough right now, because there is no leadership at this level in the state. And until that happens, maybe we're 4 years away from it, but it's not here now.
Boy, what will things look like here 4 years from now if not only nothing changes, but to the extent anything changes, it's just to codify this measure in the Constitution. I I wouldn't want to have a lot of assets in Illinois, I'll tell you that. The Summer of Joy. Ted Dabrowski, President of Wirepoints, wirepoints.com, all things Illinois policy related. Ted, thanks as always.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.